As a professional manager or a leader, which one of these cohorts makes you kind of pause and ponder before you start managing or leading them?
I'll give you a very honest answer.
Please.
I actually find it more difficult to manage Gen X's
Okay.
than Gen Z's.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yes, because in fact, in my company, it's been a challenge, right? They're not risk takers. Look, they have the experience and they do a risk assessment, right? But they like to be in their comfort zones. Okay, they're not willing to change. They're not willing to adapt. Chal raha hai, chalne do. Why you rock the boat? That kind of a mentality. So, and with the digital boom, with AI and all of that, there's been such a shift. If you do not adapt and if you do not change and if you do not embrace that, it's going to be a problem.
Welcome viewers to my channel, The Missing Link with Amit again. The topic for today's episode is managing millennials and Gen Zs. I'm sure all the millennials and Gen Zs on the other side must be very, very interested in what comes out of it. And on that note, let me introduce our guest for today, Sarmistha Ghosh. Sarmistha, welcome to my show. Thank you for finding the time for joining in today. Viewers, Sarmistha is the Chief Information Officer of OG Healthcare, a company specializing in outsourced healthcare services. Sarmistha leads the company's software solutions, services, data analytics, quality, and process excellence divisions. She brings home almost 20 years of experience spanning the BPO industry, software industry, and now in the healthcare domain. Sarmistha has been managing people across different generations for quite some time. And more importantly, she helps actively in bridging the gap between the Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Zs, who are our viewers mostly. So let's get into, Sarmistha, our topic, managing millennials and Gen Zs. But before that,
Before you start, let me thank you. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. It's an honor. And I have to admit, Amit, I'm a bit nervous and very intimidated because you're such a seasoned host and sort of senior. I have watched a few of your episodes and I thought they were quite engaging, very insightful.
thank you so much.
And today I just hope I'm able to keep up with the pens and go with a proper conversation. But I'm really looking forward to this chat and curious to see where it takes us. So fire away.
Thank you very much. Let me admit also that even after quite a few episodes behind me, I'm still up. The focus is not on me, but focus is on your experiences. So let me ask you a more, I would say, innocuous question. What is a successful leader, in your opinion, in the organizational context?
A leader is not a title, it's a mindset, right? And a leader of today is someone who's a lifelong learner, who's more than willing to learn new skills, upgrade their knowledge. A leader is someone who creates a culture of, autonomy and trust, and a culture of continuous learning, because that's what the Gen Zs and the, millennials expect.
So, and you see, I mean, since we are focusing on this topic as managing millennials and Gen Zs, but I'm sure that you are managing not only millennials and Gen Zs, you're managing Gen Xers and even few boomers, as you mentioned, for example. But yet sticking to that, and why? Because, I think I heard the stats somewhere that almost 42% of the workforce today are of the population, in India is millennials and Gen Zs, and millennials form actually the biggest part of workforce. One question just to clarify, in your experience, do you see any difference between, on a general level, between the millennials and the Gen Zs?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think there's too much of a difference. The gap is very narrow. They're willing to take bold decisions, they're risk takers, they're very curious by nature, they're really driven. But there's a huge disparity between the Gen Zs and the millennials and the Gen Xs. That is real. That's real.
So Since you mentioned, then you talked about the Gen X also, and you being a Gen X now, as a professional manager or a leader, which one of these cohorts makes you kind of pause and ponder before you start managing or leading them? Millennials, Gen Zs. Which one makes you pause and ponder?
I'll give you a very honest answer.
Okay.
I actually find it more difficult to manage Gen Xs
Okay.
than Gen Zs.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yes, because in fact, in my company, it's been a challenge, right? Uh, they're not risk takers. Look, they have the experience and they do a risk assessment, right? But they like to be in their comfort zones. Okay, they're not willing to change. They're not willing to adapt. Chal raha hai, chalne do. Why you rock the boat? That kind of a mentality. So, and with the digital boom, with AI and all of that, there's been such a shift. If you do not adapt and if you do not change and if you do not embrace that, it's going to be a problem. Redefine rules, we have to set clear expectations with them about digital fluency and embracing emerging technologies.
So my next question is probably a real problematic question, because if I was asked, for me, that's why I'm just talking out of empathy. Okay, so can you be the natural Sarmistha with them? By them, I mean the millennials and the Gen Zs. Can you be yourself?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I think that's also because I have two boys who are Gen Zs, and we are good friends. I'm trying to understand, how they think, what's their perspective. To understand the Gen Zs and the millennials could be because of that.
Wonderful, and that really kind of reflects on what you mentioned earlier. That in the context that you are in the organization, you find it or where necessary to pause and ponder more. To use the words that I asked you in that question, when you deal with the Gen Xers, okay, some others may find it the other way around because they may not have the same kind of thought uh, habits that you have, because you also had mentioned about your boys that you have well, Gen Z,
Absolutely.
right? So
And it's also because of my company, the company I work for, the culture. Yeah, so we've made that conscious effort to do that. It's very interesting since you mentioned Gen Xers and millennials. The biggest difference between them and the previous generations is their emphasis on purpose.
which one?
The Gen Zs and the millennials is their emphasis on purpose. So for them, the work has got to be purpose driven.
Okay.
To them, it's not just a job. They don't want just a job. They want a career that aligns with their values. And come on, the world is very well connected now. They have all the information they need at their fingertips. So they're looking for companies, who are doing good in the world, or at least who have strong ethical practices, or simply whose organizational principles align with theirs.
So ethics is very important, and so I also say that for the Gen Xers of the BBs, boomers, it was not, but I think they take it consciously.
To look for companies, yeah. So they look for what they want rather than what's given to them. And one of the biggest conflict is it's about loyalty, the expectations around loyalty. So we Gen Xers grew up with the idea of sticking with the same company for years. Yeah, we would be jumping jobs too every 8-10 years. But these guys, if I'm not growing, I don't see a future, the work is not meaningful, I'm out. Yeah, so you have to understand. So you have to understand where they're coming from.
They're not really counting even once a week.
They don't even, and money is actually not even a factor. It's one of the factors, but it's not the main factor. So they need growth, they need purpose, and they need a reason to care. And that's the reason why I mentioned that you have to create a culture of autonomy. I said that because they don't want to be just told what to do. Um, they want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. They want to know that that you trust them, right? So it's very important that you Let go of the age-old, the old archaic, I'm not getting the word. Command and control style, right? You do this because I said so. Doesn't work.
That's the game of meeting expectation.
Exactly. And for that matter, even micromanagement and supervision, that doesn't work either.
No.
So you've got to give them autonomy, you've got to give them ownership and trust them to figure it out for themselves. And they'll surprise you. Like I said, they're very driven, they're very curious. And if someone has an idea, encourage them to run with it. If they fail, let them learn. But if they know that you trust them and you value them, then they'll stay with you longer.
So let me just bring you back to my first question, but maybe just to kind of crisply respond to that point, that can you just again reiterate, not just repeat, what kind of leaders can manage this cohort of millennials and Gen Zs for positive impact? What kind of leader?
Someone who's willing to unlearn habits.
All interruption. Now, these leaders maybe themselves also millennials. They don't necessarily have to be the Gen Xers or boomers, right?
Right.
So I would like you to kind of explain to the viewers your mind and from your experience, is that what kind of leadership style works well when you as a leader are managing these millennials and Gen Zs?
There's been a huge shift in the workplace, Amit, like I said. Now it's more collaborative.
Right.
Okay.
So
It's less hierarchy and more partnership.
Right.
Right. So a leader who's willing to drive that culture, of
Also,
collaboration.
that they like to be left on their own to find their own ways.
Yeah, within boundaries.
Yeah.
It's not like do whatever you.
What is the risk of that creating inefficiencies?
No, it doesn't. Oh,
Yeah.
let me just. So for that, you've got to have robust processes, systems. So look, like I said, micromanagement doesn't work. Well, so instead, you've got to have these systems and processes to drive discipline and to drive the positive behaviors.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so instead of you policing or monitoring, let it be self-monitoring. Let it be self-driven. Right? So that works. If I may share a best practice, this is something that I heard in one of my older companies, and that was one of my biggest takeaways, and I tried to implement the same in my current company. So the way you conduct a professional success meeting. So this has communication, this has setting expectations, and this has motivation. It's all rolled into one routine. So just a process, okay. So first things, you've got to do your homework. So what are the strengths, what are the areas of improvement, what kind of message would you like to deliver, right? You have to have that clarity.
Right.
But instead of that being a lecture, what you do is you do a guided conversation. Okay, so you ask close-ended questions and you guide the conversation. You direct it to the point that you're trying to make. Okay, why close-ended? Because if it was open-ended, then they tend to digress, and before you know, you would have lost control of the conversation. So instead of you telling them what to do, you take them through the process of self-realization and you get them to come up with their own action plan. And when they do, you encourage them to break it down into specific behaviors that are doable and that are actionable. And then you tie it to their goals, short term and long term.
So it's so interesting what you just now described, kind of 3 or 4 steps. And you're aware that today I spend a lot of my time doing life coaching, executive coaching. What you said is what a good coach does. I mean, should do, etc. Because it is very different to that, old, what you said, the archaic command and control style of leadership or management. And today, from what you mentioned, what comes to me is that, and in some episodes together with Vinay, we have addressed this point that a good manager can actually or should be a good coach. And what you're saying is to manage millennials and Gen Zs, my friends, okay, your managers, and your managers could be even millennials, not Gen Zs maybe, but definitely millennials too, and Gen Xers or boomers like me, they have to act like a coach. And they don't have to go and they have to engage your, in again, an old archaic term I love, which is they have to engage your or their volitional energy. Okay, you have to kind of allow them to be volitional, which is, practice their free will, but within boundaries, which is where your process and symptoms comes.
Yes.
Right?
I'm glad you used the word coach because that was what we used to be called, coach. You are a coach. You're not a manager, but you're a coach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the reason why the old, the archaic, whatever, the command and control style doesn't work is because there is no buy-in, right? And these days, the youngsters, they need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. So if a task feels pointless, they just switch off. Yeah, the engagement drops. Yeah, and coming back to the PSM, so what happens, when you're following up and if you find that they have not implemented it, then it's very easy for you to hold them accountable for their actions because it was their action plan, it is what they committed.
Exactly.
So,
They are the owners. They're two.
exactly, ownership and accountability, correct. Those are the two words. And it really works. If done well, it really works. Requires practice, but if you can have a solid conversation like that, uh, you are sorted. For the next few months, you're sorted. You don't have to monitor, you don't have to do anything because they will stay motivated and focused.
It's honestly there is the music for my ears. I hope and I really wish there is music for our viewers here who are not only Gen Zs or millennials, but even Gen Xers or boomers, if any are left still in organizations. Let me then kind of go into the Sarmistha a little bit more. How long have you been managing and leading people in organizations? A number of years.
20 years.
20 years?
Oh, as a manager?
Yes. How long have you been managing and leading people in organizations?
I think probably since 2000.
But the next question is more from me, my curiosity. When did you first realize that you are not only a manager, but also a leader?
When I was working for AOL, because we were part of a leadership training program. It was called a Future Leaders Program, AOL America Online.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a very people-oriented organization, and it was ahead of its times that way. One of the topics I remember was how not to be a boss. Difference between leaders and supervisors.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay. And did that realization bring any difference to how you engaged with the people you were leading or managing?
100%. That's what I said. That was one of my biggest takeaways. I believe in that program, and I've tried to implement that in my current organization.
Wonderful. Can I ask you one? It may sound a little bit of an academic question, but I would like you to maybe mention 1, 2, max 3 areas where you invested consciously so that you practice as a leader and not as a supervising manager.
Me personally?
Yes. Because you said that you realized when you were with the America Online and to after some interventions that yes, how to not be a boss, how to be a leader. So that realization came consciously. But then what did you invest in specifically? Okay, so that leader is able to practice.
Yeah. So first thing, I upgraded my own skills. I did my MBA from IM.
Okay.
Very late in life because I wanted to gain some knowledge and I wanted to be hands-on so I could contribute, directly. So I tried to implement it. I implement whatever I learned in terms of how I conducted myself around people. A very important point is active listening. So you've got to listen well. You've got to understand somebody else's point of view, even when you do not necessarily have to agree with it, but you still have to listen. So you understand what the other person is trying to tell you, and you can create that win-win situation, right? That compromising, you can come to a position of compromise, and so both parties are happy. So I'm very conscious when I'm communicating, especially when I'm delivering feedback. I ensure that it's not what I say, but it's how I say it. So in terms of the words I use, my body language, the tone of voice, right? Feedback is very essential. Ensure that it's always constructive, and you always do that positive reinforcement thing. So because the person who is receiving it need to receive the feedback positively, and and not get demotivated, right? Then very consciously, if someone gives an idea, right, I do not dismiss it outright, right? I hear, we try to evaluate the idea and understand whether it makes any business sense. In fact, I'm speaking from experience. We've actually done that. So one of the middle managers had a great business idea. She approached us. We evaluated it, and we actually have invested in it. We rolled with it. So
Let me ask one question. As a practicing leader, to become the kind of leader that manages millennials and Gen Zs the best way, does the job of being a practicing leader for them become more time consuming? Does the leader?
no, actually, all you have to do is walk the talk. Just walk the talk. When you say embrace technology, when you're trying to preach that, you do that yourself. When you say be nice to people, do not be rude, you do that yourself.
But things like listening actively and then evaluating and then coming up and communicating your conclusion, decision, whatever it is, as opposed to the old command control style, which actually I think was very efficient, very efficient. But this leadership style, I believe, and I'm not going back to what I was doing, but yes, it's similar, thankfully. Uh, I had to give more time. So I just wanted to ask you whether this means that as a leader, you have to actually find time. It needs you
Find time to do what?
to listen, to evaluate. Because if you are command controlling, you don't have to.
So you have to invest a lot of time.
Exactly.
A lot of time. In fact, that's what I was trying to, bring up that point earlier. You've got to invest in their skills also, in their development, right? And we created this L&D team in our organization whose job is to sit and curate these programs and then identify your senior managers in the company who can function as mentors and facilitators, so they can deliver these programs to a group of selected individuals who are basically being grouped to be as future leaders. And then we've also invested in LinkedIn Learning. It's a great database. It's a huge repository. Yeah. So we are constantly encouraging people to subscribe, to sign up for those courses, webinars, workshops to learn new skills. So all of these programs had to be designed by us. They're carefully thought through. So of course you have to invest. It's a whole system. That's what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Let me remind our viewers that her title is Chief Information Officer, but actually she kind of overrides quite a few non-IT kind of roles, which they are more significant in my eye, and as well as your management or your boards, which is about, this is what we are talking about. Because if somebody is only a techie and handling only the tech side of it, without making sure that this tech side also actually creates value for the people
Absolutely.
in application, it doesn't really work. So, Sarmistha, before I probably come to the last part of our conversation today, there are two, I think, very obvious items that I would like to have your opinion and experience. One is that, thanks to COVID, that's how I relate to it, we, the workforce today, got used to this working from home. I have my grown-up children also who are working from home. And in fact, one of them has been recently asked to report to the headquarters city because he's staying not in the headquarters city. And that kind of puts the spanners in the work on the person in front, okay, how to do, what to do, etc. But work from home has become a reality, even if it became because of a black swan event like the COVID, right? And so now, how does it impact? How does it impact both the development of these cohort, the millennials, Gen Zs, or people at large, and how does it impact also that the company, yes, is able to manage its objectives? For example, what are your thoughts on that?
So I was so hoping you would ask me that question. Amit, Gen X, my lot, we grew up with the whole, hard work pays off mentality, the grind culture. where putting in long hours was almost a badge of honor. We didn't question it. So if you weren't burning out, you were where you've been working hard. Um, yeah.
Very well.
And then millennials came and they were like, hey, wait, do we have to suffer to be successful? And now Gen Zs have taken it up a notch and they're saying, why are we even talking about this? Let's just work smart, get the work done without killing ourselves. So, yes, for these younger folks, balance is very important.
There's more.
We demand balance.
There's more to life than with it.
Yes. Work-life balance is non-negotiable. So they're not willing to sacrifice their personal lives for their jobs. And honestly, I admire that. And it's not like they're not hard workers. They absolutely are. But they prioritize their well-being in a way, it's really refreshing. If there's one thing that I've learned from them is work isn't life. It's part of life. And I couldn't agree more. And that's why comments like, 70-hour work week by the respected Narayan Murthy or Sunday being a work day by the L&T chief don't sit well with them, or Rick House for that matter.
Right.
They've shown us that you can be ambitious without sacrificing your sanity because it's not about working more, it's about working smarter. And that's a lesson worth learning. And just to clarify, when I say work smart, I am not referring to the corner cutters and the ones, who are trying to adopt the system. Yeah. I am obviously referring to efficiency, which is low effort but high quality output.
Yeah, and like you mentioned in a little different context earlier, there's a role that the process and the system that it also plays. Because without that, can be cow. And you can't blame any individual or any cohort of people. You label them Gen Zs or Millennials or Gen X for that.
I'm sorry. On that note, if I may share a best practice because it's very relevant, I find it very difficult to make a point without an example. So, in my company, in my organization, data process automation, these are the buzzwords. So, we train our middle managers to become citizen developers. So, they're encouraged to carve out their processes, standardize their workflows and automate them wherever possible. They're not technical people. They're not expected to be software developers. For the complex automation, you have specialized teams, which is my jurisdiction. But they are taught to create simple applications using no-code, low-code platforms like RPA, etc., which are meant for non-developers to increase operational efficiency, to make their lives easier. So that's what I call that's what I mean by smart work.
It reminds me, the boomer that I'm supposed to be, from the brick and mortar business. I think it sounds similar to the 5S practice. I don't think nowadays in your kind of industry they use these archaic terms. But how does this, while we are discussing about work from home, and now there's worldwide, there is a kind of a pullback from the management for obvious reasons. And I'm not trying to, paint somebody black or white. But yet, the impact probably is on attrition management, on, knowledge retention, because without knowledge and skills being retained, it walks out at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So how do you manage that while we are going through these very challenging times? Because nobody's to blame for it. So we all are products of our habits and socioeconomic environment, and these will happen. People have gone, and working, and again, like you said, you're not talking about corner cutters or,
Yeah.
and those kind of people were always there, but donkeys, centuries, right? So we are talking about people who are good, who are knowledgeable, skilled, who want to work. Okay, but then they have to also manage the real challenges of shifting initially to work from home and now to so-called hybrid, and maybe tomorrow to completely coming to workplaces, which may not happen, I guess, for many kind of works, and it's not necessary. But how does it impact, and how do you manage the attrition challenge and knowledge retention challenge?
Specifically to my domain, which is ID, analytics, all of that, you can pretty much work from anywhere. So as a manager, I would not worry about the number of hours or where they're working from. I would focus on the deliverables and the output. So if a team member wants a 3-hour break because they have to run some important errands, it's absolutely fine by me as long as you're communicating and you're meeting the deadlines and you're logging back in to finish up the work, right? But yeah, and changing work models. You are in a hybrid situation. You work 2 days out of the office, 3 days in their homes. I don't think that's a problem anymore because technology is very advanced. You have VPN, you have Teams, all of that. So that can be done.
But let me insert you, Sarmistha, over there. But I hear that there are a lot of companies which are in, if I may say, services industry broadly, which is tech services industry. They are asking people to, kind of report back, but not every day in a week. They ask people to come for 2 days sometimes or 3 days sometimes. Maybe not for the working reason alone, maybe for other reasons.
For the connect, camaraderie, fun,
And that
and the relationship
is that
equation.
causing attrition. Is that causing attrition? Because the usual causes of attrition is not, that's industry agnostic. There are aspirations people have to meet for sure, and people have to go. I'm not trying to get into that one.
I don't think so. They would definitely prefer a work from home kind of a work model.
Because a lot of people post-COVID, sorry to interrupt again, a lot of people post-COVID are not in their so-called headquarter towns or cities. They are in their hometowns now, and suddenly they are asked to come. For example, somebody who has to shift from, let's say, Lucknow to Bangalore, his or her cost of living goes up by
Yes.
quite a few notches. And that may cause attrition, that may cause knowledge being lost. Okay, that's my broad question. Of course, we are talking about a brick and mortar manufacturing because nobody really works from home because you can't do that. But in the IT services, which forms a large part of that, city today or Gurgaon or, the most of the growth has happened in this sectors, right? We didn't see huge growth in the manufacturing sector. So that's why I'm sticking to this sector.
Yeah. So to answer your question, honestly, there's no formula for that, right? So it is what it is, and you have to accept, correct? But you can still work on the other things. For example, if you invest in their development, in their skills, all of that, so they know the company cares about me, the company is invested in me, right? See, end of the day, they want to see light at the end of the tunnel, right? Um, they want to see a clear growth path, right? They want to know where they stand, where they have headed, and how to get there.
So let me just hold you on that one, and I want to address the managers and leaders of our amongst our viewers. Uh, they may be millennials, even or Gen Xers or some boomers still left. I think that's what you can pick up from what Sarmistha is mentioning, that you have to be open to this aspiration, or not even aspirations. I would even choose the word the need of any Gen Z or millennial that they want to grow. And to grow, you have to create those pathways, for example,
correct.
right? That you mentioned.
Absolutely. And you have to understand that these folks have grown up with constant stimulation. So they want action, they want to know that something's happening, they're excited. And so you've got to make work meaningful for them and exciting and relevant. So only then they'll stay with you, and you'll be able to retain them.
What is the impact which creates today attrition again? For example, from this, I don't know what should I call the Frankenstein looming, which is AI. How is that impacting the workforce, particularly the knowledge people?
There, like I said, it is an ever evolving shift, and um, it's not a one time change. So, this is the new normal and this is the new ecosystem, right? So, whatever is relevant today is going to become obsolete tomorrow. It's happening right now, Amit, as we speak. So, currently we have generative AI, and we are already hearing about agentic AI, right? And that's on the march. It's just a matter of time that's going to take over, right? So, companies, leaders, they have to consciously embrace technology and make that change to be able to stay relevant.
Thank you for that. And because that would bring me to probably my last question that I had in my notes. Because, see, I think very selfishly speaking, uh, we are all Indians, and I am a proud Indian. I'm sure you are too. And most people I know are proud of being Indians. And we cannot just keep on talking about, our GDP growing at an organic level. Yeah, we need to go over per capita GDPs also. And there's a lot of us Indians who are not even got the opportunities that some of us have been lucky and fortunate to get. So I'm not getting into the broad social malaise and other issues. But my question still is limited to millennials and Gen Zs. For these people, okay, because they are the future. They're going to be the boomers and the generators tomorrow and day after, right? They are the guys who are going to lead our country to whatever this Viksit Bharat or, developed country with at least a middle income per capita country, etc. Okay. I don't think I'm going to do that much.
Right.
So what do you think they need to learn or take seriously, to become successful leaders of tomorrow? Because they're going to lead for the next 20 years or maybe even 30 years. The guys who are in 20s or 30s today, they're the leaders within another 10 years or 20, 15 years. Maybe even 5 years, depending on the context and organization.
You asked me that question, right? The first question.
Repeat?
No, you asked me one question in the beginning of the episode, right? Pretty much those same things.
Okay.
Pretty much, that doesn't change. That doesn't change at all.
Can you repeat that a little bit in short for our viewers, particularly the Gen Zs? Because, my friend Vinay tells me that the Gen Zs have less attention span, but those Gen Zs and those millennials who are still listening to our podcast, I'm sure they are not suffering from attention span deficit. So for their benefit, shall repeat. Let me repeat the question now, and you can rephrase or reframe. You mentioned it the same, but yet that what should the Gen Z or the millennials of today focus upon so that they become successful leaders of tomorrow?
Right. Okay, so a couple of things. Like I said, it's not a title, it's a mindset, right? So communication, it's a cornerstone.
With interest our viewers. Yeah.
So communication, so soft skills, empathy, that goes a long way. Employees thrive on recognition, so shout outs, appreciations go a long way. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't even have to be monetary. It can be a simple, hey, well done, or you crushed it today, or good job during a team meeting. That can make all the difference, right? Because they're not very different from many of us. They want to be successful, they want to make a difference, and they want to be recognized for their contributions, right? So big or small, if you are celebrating any accomplishment, that goes a long way. So regular feedback, extremely important. Gone are the days, Amit, when you had to wait for a formal appraisal every 6 months. The feedback needs to be real time now, right? So if something is great, let them know. Positive reinforcement. If something is off, got to address it then and there before it becomes a habit. Again, feedback or your communication, it needs to be very constructive. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. I always use this phrase.
About the body
language. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
because you want the other person to receive the feedback positively and work on it, correct? And the reason why people want feedback is because they want to know where they stand and how they can improve, because they're very goal oriented. So, they want to know their work, how it's contributing to the bigger picture, right?
To be an active listener, we touched upon that, is so essential for leaders.
Absolutely.
But for the Gen X or Gen Zs, the Gen Zs or millennials, for them to also learn the tricks to become successful leaders of tomorrow, they also have to be, active listeners in the way we understand it from, I speak for myself, I understand as a boomer. They have to also practice empathy. I'm told, I don't know of my own knowledge, that sometimes they lack empathy. Is it a semantics problem or is that a reality?
I won't agree. I haven't observed. I have a different perspective. I haven't. I've actually found it, I find it very easy to work with them. I think they're absolutely fine. Or maybe, my company, we managed to hire the best candidates, the best Gen Zs possible. Maybe. Let me realize. spot on. Yeah, it's also the culture because you see your exactly it's top down, right? Your CEO walks the talk and is percolated down, right? You're right, and it's one of our core principles. No ego, and being straightforward, and respecting others. These are so it's entrenched in our values, So and we constantly reiterate these values. So I think maybe because of that.
So I want to probably, come to the end of our podcast with one stakeholder in the game, which both of us are also, and that's about the parents in our viewerships. Now, and I mean the parents of Gen Zs primarily, or maybe the young millennials too. Because I think the Gen Xs are the parents of the young millennials too, very young. Because this I would still say the American labeling and the whatever, but we understand what you're talking about. So, what would you like to say? You are yourself a parent, right, of two teenage boys. What would you like to say to the parents who have to manage Gen Zs? Because I hear a lot of noise about this problem, that problem, including where I live. I hear about drug abuse. I hear about many negative things. But for sure, it's not a complete story. Okay, and it's not an episode we offer that can be a full series of such issues. But yet, what would you like to share as an experience as a parent and as a practicing leader? How parents should be the word I leave it to you, should or how would you share what would be good for? Because I think every parent wants good about their children, right? Right. So from that perspective, what would you like to share for the parents in our viewers?
Well, I wouldn't like to preach because I'm also a flawed parent, to be honest. But
Aren't we all?
yeah, what I would like to say is, be supportive. Um, Please understand that they're very opinionated and they're very well informed these days. So um, they have their own values and they have their passion. So please support them. So I'm a software engineer. Both my children have decided not to do engineering, and my elder one is pursuing international relations, and my younger one wants to do music production. So support them, whatever they want to do, and yes, give them ownership. Again, the same thing. It's not so different, with parents. Ownership, accountability. Let them learn from their mistakes, but let them take their own decisions.
Thank you very much. In fact, in my book, which I published long back, I have a chapter on where I bring out parallels from a purpose point of view between a manager and a parent. Because to be a manager, a good manager, and to be a good parent, I think, is equally risky. That's why you mentioned I think every parent, every manager is flawed. That doesn't matter. Point is that can I remove one of those 10 flaws that I have as a manager or a leader or a parent. So, on that note, Sarmistha, last thoughts from you. How did you like our conversation, and from the purpose that it may impact? That's my purpose, Vinay's purpose, that we want to maybe influence a few people to have a
hopefully, that's the objective. I had a great time. Thank you once again for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to more such conversations in the future. And I hope our viewers will, enjoy watching the show.
Thank you very much, Sarmistha. Thank you very much. And viewers, if you found it interesting, please don't forget to leave your comments or questions for Sarmistha or me or Vinay, and we would love to come back to you. Please subscribe to our channel, The Missing Link with Amit, and go on encouraging us to contribute more and more. Thank you very much, Millennials and Gen Zs in particular.